Good evening, welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Jemima, your host for this evening. Now, the country went into a frenzy when the Education Ministry announced its devastating examination results in December last year, pointing to a just over 80% failure rate. Now, for us to make sense of what transpired last year and the years before, we invited Ms. Edda Bohn from the Education Ministry today. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Bohn.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me.
Now, Ms. Bohn, let's jump right into it.
Yes.
I mean, everybody's on the edges of their chairs this time around. So, early this week, the Namibian Teachers Union had a press conference, and they said they've cautioned and warned the ministry against implementing the revised curriculum, which is now the question, basically the issue that everybody's unhappy with. And yet the ministry went ahead despite what they believe was several concerns about the lack of funding, the lack of capacity. They also feel that to this point, since the rollout of this new curriculum, no teacher has been trained on teaching AS levels, and still there's no arrangement made for this. Can you comment on this, please?
Yes, thank you so much. We must see this also in a bigger context, because the higher IGCSE was phased out at some point in time, and it was actually the higher IGCSE that was used as a benchmark for our NSSC, that means Namibia Senior Secondary Certificate of Education Higher Level subject. So, because IGCSE was abolished, there was no more benchmarking for our higher level. And that was within a given time frame. There was also a notice by, our international quality assurance body, which was the Cambridge Education International. So we had to work towards that due date. And that is somehow how we spaced it all out, the implementation of phasing in junior primary, senior primary, and then grade 8 and 9, and then following by, subsequently 10, 11, and then finally AS level. So this reform of phasing in happened already since 2015. And every year, prior to the implementation, there was teacher training. But what I do take full note of is that this teacher training that we provided was following the cascade model, which means that not necessarily every single teacher who has to teach was exposed to the training, but a selected group of trainers of training, trainers and TOTs, and who then had the responsibility to roll out, cascade the training. Every school principal was invited for training for this transition from the previous curriculum to the new curriculum. So there was capacity building to some extent. But it's also a difference to, if I bring you last season's fashion gene, and I bring you the new season's fashion, and I tell you how it differs, it doesn't mean that you have, experienced it yourself. So just by listing the differences, it does not mean that, the teachers were able to live and exercise the new curriculum. I want us to embrace it in the context that we had basically also no time to get more prepared than we were prepared. So the implementation plan was fully costed with the textbooks requirement, practical equipment, and so on. But as we, implemented, the economic recession started also in 2016-17, followed by a severe drought that, reduced income and had effects on our budget allocations. And then came COVID. We were not yet recovering from the drought, and COVID hit us. So it was an accumulation of a lot of adversities that made it now so bad. And what we also realize is now as part of the analysis is that in 2018 we had the last SAT, Standardized Achievement Tests, which are the diagnostic tool for primary teaching and learning. So we then stopped with it because of the financial resources also, streamlining the resources to get the new curriculum going. But the cohort who wrote the final exams last year was a cohort who was tested in 2018 in the grade 7, and they revealed already that 40% did not achieve, or were standing at below basic competencies. So in mathematics, and then the percentages improved a bit in English and natural sciences, which means they came already from primary with a backlog. And by the time they came into secondary, they were grade 9 when the lockdown came. So they had the biggest loss of contact teaching and learning time. And we know that the classroom is actually the place, together with the home and the homework and the community, where the results are made. So they had, unfortunately, the worst share of it all.
Wow, this is some devastating news, because it basically, you've just said that the ministry knew that 40% of these learners were not going to make it.
They had already that backlog.
Yes.
Yeah. And we responded to the SAT with a teacher training, but again, it is only what we call through the cascade model. So there were selected teachers called in and supported through continuous professional development activities, but again, they were not every teacher. So in 2018,
when the ministry saw these the results of these SAT tests, what were the plan then?
Yeah, we developed teaching material to support the teachers, and the SAT reports come also disaggregated per school. Every school gets their own report that identifies the shortcomings. So we analyze these and formulate and consolidate it into national training response. And but the rollout of that training response was also in a limited fashion. So it is that education is this continuous ball rolling, and as the ages get higher, the brain gets more stagnant, and it is so important to catch learners early and have early intervention programs. So that is also what brings the policy position of investing more into ECD in pre-primary, getting the foundation right. So as part of this dilemma, recognizing that the reading and writing skills are so low and the numeracy skills, we have also started introducing the Jolly Phonics program. The phonics program that really is research proven, a better approach to teaching reading and writing than word recognition and of alike. So with that we'll follow, and the national conference brought it also out again, that get the basics right. So we will focus on that and continue focusing on that.
So there's a lot of things that you've just said and that I need to deal with. One thing that stands out for me is that when we have seen in 2018 already that for around 40% of the learners could not master the basic requirements. That means COVID was not the problem. It only aggravated the problem that we've already had.
Yes.
Then you've also said that we've introduced a number of measures to deal with this. But from where I stand, it doesn't seem like anything is filtering down. So where exactly does this leave us and parents out there?
I think we just have to join hands tighter and work closer together. And as I said before, and it is only in teams, together, achieves more, that we, work together with this dilemma and eliminate the polarization of, oh, it's the learners, they are ill-disciplined. It is not, because if you care for a child and a learner, they will also, multiply that love in return. So it is what we have. We launched also in 2018 the National Safe Schools Framework, which exactly pegs onto that problem of creating that safe and conducive environment. So from the policy perspective, we have, making strides in creating that understanding on paper, but then we still face, dilapidated structures, overcrowded classrooms. The demand for education has risen severely because of, the increased birth rate and so on. I just want to emphasize that we have not managed to run with that, equally fast rollout and intensive care for our children and learners. And as we had, in 2008, as part of the then Education and Training Sector Improvement Program, ETSIP, we had set ourselves to have 100% ECD pre-primary coverage by 2015. But we are yet right now just above 55% in ECD, but also the same in pre-primary. And we are even aware of that many many learners who are supposed to be in pre-primary and grade 1, 2, and so on, are stuck in ECD centers because the next primary school is just too far away, and it's not so commonly acceptable to send your your little ones into a hostel. That is only under extreme circumstances that we have primary hostels. And we have that dilemma that on the one side, yes, we commit to access, and access has always been very good on the books, but we also know that there are so many learners who are still left behind, or who are overaged, or who enter already the system overaged, and then, struggle because they are overaged. They are sort of, feeling left out, and then it just has that multiplier effect unless we have proper learning support. Now, the ministry has also instituted that program of training teachers nationally in every region. We have done extensive teacher training on learner support. But then if you have an overcrowded class, then from one teacher to, to address really everyone, if there are more than 30 and in a junior primary 35, then it becomes like an impossible task to give that individual attention. So then we need to cultivate to stay behind and work longer hours together with the learners, and then we need the buy-in of the parent community to stay on longer, to hold hands and to improve together. For example, we had the positive deviance study done, and that study revealed that even though a school was, physical infrastructure not as good as others in urban areas, then yet this school, against all odds, produced good results at every level. But what also was lifted or unearthed by that study was that at that school you had this charismatic leadership and joint involvement of the community, that they could create the school to be the most caring space, such that ECDs as well as, the junior primaries, it was a combined school, all wanted to be at school, and in the afternoons everybody would jointly leave the school. So it's that dynamics of, as community. A working school community, that team, that collectiveness, that togetherness, holding it together, that is what will make the big difference.
Ms. Bohn, we have to go for a break quickly, but I want you to just quickly break down the allocation of $200 per primary learner per year, $300 per secondary learner per year. You just spoke about investment. If I break down this, I would come to around $19 average per learner per month in a primary school. What exactly is the ministry's intention, or what did they envision with this $90 buy for a learner?
Yeah, it is a minute amount. We
Yes.
are fully aware of that. You know, it just caters for that small gap in, you know, consumables that school needs from day to day. So it is, yeah, how should we say, call it also grossly under-resourced, because for that you can basically buy 3 exercise books, and if you have 3 learning areas, that is now writing, you know, your mother tongue and your numeracy, then you have covered that, and then you would be short of all the other possible consumables and, you know, day-to-day running of a school. Yes, of course, our materials and supplies budget should come in to give the necessary toilet paper, cleaning materials, and so on. But then the deployment of the resources in time to get everything to school sometimes also falls behind schedule. So, for example, we committed from the ministry in the previous, or the financial year that comes to an end now, to really deploy funding to the regions in order to do bulk purchases of these consumables for schools, including stationery. Now then, when we had to, you know, balance all the needs, the funds were too little. So the only thing that could be actually dispersed is the school grant funding directly to the school. And so the big change from previous years is that this school grant funding went directly from head office into school accounts. Mm-hmm. So in the past we used to hear, yeah, but the region doesn't disperse in time to the school. So that is the one small success that we have, that all schools, there were only 5 where there were some discrepancies with the account details. It's the same amount of money. Yeah, it's the same small amount per learner, but it is over 180 million in totality that was dispersed this way. And of course, the schools have to make use of this money within the next 3 months until the end of March, until the new budget year comes. And with that, we hope to stimulate the process adequately, that the regions do bulk purchases and then have the stationery for the remainder of the year, as well as come the new 2024 year.
All right, we are quickly going for a break, then we'll be back. See you after break. Welcome back. Now, my name is Jemima Beatrice. We are speaking, if you've just joined us, we are speaking to Ms. Edda Bohn from the Ministry of Education, talking about the funding of education in the country. Ms. Bohn, before we went on a break, you were talking about the money that is allocated to schools and that there's a new system and that you're hoping to see more benefits from this. Can you just elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, with our direct disbursement to schools, we hope to enable the school management together with the school boards, because every school must have a school board, a functional school board, with its treasury and all together, managing the finances of the school. So every school would draw up a budget, and then with that, they would, you know, approve certain purchases and acquisitions and so on. We still all have to follow the Procurement Act, number 15 of 2015. And then we have also provided what is called school grant guidelines that really guide the procurement processes and the bookkeeping processes at schools. So, But if parents, school boards and parent community and teacher, school managers still have questions whether they can buy the one computer or, the Wi-Fi for the school or so, they should really contact the regional education director to get authorization for, the extraordinary. But altogether, we hope that through this direct procurement to the school, that, it is streamlined and the resources are more readily available to the needs, to meet the needs of the school.
There's still very little resources. Ms. Bohn, let me just interject here. The reality is that many parents cannot afford to supply or supplement the stationery for the children. And I've also personally seen and observed that even teachers themselves who are underpaid often look for, textbooks online, teaching materials online, so that they themselves can do their job properly. Where then does this leave the government and the ministry? Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like government is truly committed to education. If you look at government giving one child 19 Namibian dollars per month, what can that buy? I don't think it can even buy a decent pencil. And then if a teacher must look for their own teaching material, what does this say about this government's commitment? So when you as a ministry send out this money to the schools, like you've not done directly, in your mind, what is it that the $19 should buy? Should it buy a pencil? Should it buy a book? What should a $19 buy in a month? And if the teachers cannot find this, learning material online, where will they find it, if not at the schools where they teach?
Yeah, we want the schools to supplement the resources. Yes, there is a textbook budget and every school has to order according to their needs. We are also fully aware that the needs are identified, but then what comes back to the school is perhaps a third or a quarter or a fifth of what they actually need. We are fully aware of that. But we must also see it in that big context, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, the economic downturn. So even in our households, we have, teens who say, but Mom, I need this, I want that, and so on. And your household budget or your pocket money budget is just this. So we would not exceed the budget, not to, cause us more dilemma at, within a household. And in a similar situation, we need to see the bigger picture of education. We number one is we have to pay the salaries. So that is what goes first and is fully committed, the remuneration budget. And then we'll see, of course, we have to pay the utilities. Those are water, electricity, rentals and so on. And then we'll see what we have, and that would then go to resources. Of course, we try to motivate, a bottom-up costing, which we did, many years ago under the leadership of late Iambo. We did a bottom-up costing, and it exceeded the current budget of those days already. It in 20, it was 11 or 12, when we did that bottom-up costing, and that took into consideration, actually providing the ideal resources and everything for a learner. So it just shows you we are now, 20, we are 13, 10, more than 10 years later. Mm-hmm. And that, had already in its own an inflation multiplier in itself, yes. Which, would give you an indication that perhaps our budget is, a quarter less of what it should be, yes. If we would have gone proportionally and with the growth of learners. So what we have observed is, yes, our learner numbers have, say, grown so at a particular rate, but our teacher numbers have grown only half of that rate. And that is exactly where the unions come in and say, yes, we have the overcrowded classes. Yes, we have double shifting at schools, platooning, and so on. So the problems are just enumerated. And the TESS intervention, the transforming education, the preparation for that summit and also our own national conference was to get that buy-in. Yes, education is in, you know, in ICU. Let's focus and streamline and put everything together to take it out.
Ms. Bohn, in conclusion, could you just share with us the budget allocation of the last 5 years and the number of learners of that you've had over the last 5 years?
Yeah, it is difficult now to just pinpoint exactly the figures, but in general trends, the budget allocation per learner over the past years looked as if it decreased. So at one point in time, if you take the total, you know, the exact allocation to education divided by the total number of learners, then it at times looks as if there was less. I recall some years ago in a budget speech was spoken of 18,000 per annum per learner. But currently, if you do the same calculation of the total of 339,579 learners as per 15 school day statistics divided into, or whichever way you, what I mean is the total budget divided by this number of learners, then you get to less than 17,000. Now, that just shows you that, yes, there is been in relation to the number of learners, there has been a slight decrease over, you know, if you take a period of time. Mm-hmm. But altogether, we must also realize that on the continent, Namibia is one of those countries that invests the largest amount.
But it doesn't mean anything if we have 80%.
That is because the majority of our funding goes to pay salaries. And yes, for ourselves, in our own circumstances in Namibia, it feels as if teachers are underpaid. It feels that way, but in comparison to other African countries, we are still, you know, well off. So it is a very difficult situation to balance because, unfortunately, the cost of living in urban centers in Namibia is very high, yes. Unfortunately.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Bohn. Have a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for tuning in. See you next time.